We will start with the webinar. Good evening everyone and welcome to this series of Rendezvous with Business School. Today we have with us Mr. Dylan. He is Associate Director of MBA Admissions at Fordham University. He manages the recruitment and enrollment for full-time MBA and professional MBA programs. He received his bachelor's and master's degree in English from Trinity College before starting his career in higher education. He will be talking about the full-time MBA program, the curriculum, admission requirements, and employment opportunities. Before we start, let me set some ground rule. Please type in your questions only when we open the floor for Q&A. So do not type anything while we are speaking. So welcome Dylan. I request you to start your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Shivani. It's my pleasure to be with you all today. Like Shivani said, my name is Dylan Mosenthal. I'm the Associate Director of MBA Admissions here at Fordham University's Gabelli School of Business. We offer a lot of different programs here, ranging from 14 specialized masters to 3 MBAs, but today we will focus particularly on the full-time MBA, but during the Q&A portion, if you do have any questions particular to our other programs, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. So I will spend the first 10 or 15 minutes or so giving you a brief overview of the full-time MBA, the structure of the curriculum, what really differentiates us as a business school from other business schools in the U.S. and in the world, really. And then, like I said, we'll reserve the second half for any questions. So like I mentioned, we have 3 MBA programs, the full-time MBA, the professional, and the executive. All are different in their own ways in terms of duration, in terms of profile of student. The full-time MBA program is really a program designed for young professionals looking to do a career pivot, or someone looking to make a change within their career path. So that could be someone looking to change industry as a whole, so someone who's working in education looking to go into consulting, or someone who is in more of a marketing role looking to go into finance. It could be someone looking to stay within their industry, looking to change, functional area. So someone who works in healthcare in a finance related role, but wants to switch over into more of a marketing role. But I think that's important to note when you look to differentiate a full-time and a part-time program, is that a professional program is designed for a working professional that isn't necessarily looking to make a change, but rather looking to climb up the ladder faster, right? They're looking to utilize an MBA skill set in order to gain a skill that will allow them to climb up the ladder faster. So for our full-time MBA students, these are students who are looking to make that change. They're looking to immerse themselves into this 2-year program. Classes happen during the day, Monday through Thursday. I'll talk a little bit about really what a sample 2-year looks like, but just in general, the students will come in with about 4 to 6 years of work experience. That work experience piece is extremely important. I mean, at the end of the day, what differentiates an MBA program from a specialized master's program is that work experience piece, because a lot of the work that you're doing in the classroom revolves around the perspectives that you can bring from your work history. So whereas some of our specialized master's programs are more technical in nature and is filled with students that maybe only have 1 or 2 years of work experience, we really look hard at that 4 to 6 years as an important portion of the application. The average age is around 28. And one of the things that you'll see across all of our MBA programs and specialized masters as well is that our class sizes are extremely small. That's one of the ways in which we differentiate ourselves from a lot of the MBA programs that are offered here in the States, in particular here in New York City. The cohort for last year was about 42 students, and that's something that we do strategically. We pride ourselves in having an active learning environment inside the classroom where students are expected to participate, engage in conversation with their peers, challenge the opinions of their professors. We're not the type of institution where you'll be seated up in row Z of an auditorium, taking notes passively. We really do pride ourselves in having that active learning environment. So I will touch a little bit more about exactly what a curriculum looks like But quickly to touch on the Executive MBA, that's another one of our working professionals programs. So for someone who is looking not necessarily to make a big career pivot, but someone who's a leader in their company, they're looking to gain this Executive MBA skill set to get to the next kind of C-suite level position within their company. And that's structured a little bit differently. Courses are offered on the weekends. It's 1 3-day weekend a month for about 22 months. So just to dive in more into the full-time MBA program, and I'll actually go back to that slide in a second. I want to start with this. So this is what a typical 2 years would look like for a full-time MBA student at the Gabelli School. So the first year is really designed to offer the fundamental of business courses. All the foundational courses that you would need in working in any business environment. So accounting, finance, marketing, management, statistics. These are all courses that you are required to take and that you take with your cohort. The rationale is in your first year we want to give you this foundation so that you're able to leverage that into your internship, which happens the summer after your first year. So we front load all of the required courses in that first year, and then, like I mentioned, the internship. About 96% of our students will take advantage of pursuing an internship in the summer between their 2 years. And I think the main reason why so many of our students are able to land such a great internship is that we're in New York City. We are in really the hub of business. There's over 300 company headquarters right around our campus. So students take advantage of being able to get that professional experience during that summer term. The second year is when students are able to really specialize. They're able to take courses within a list of concentrations that I'll talk about in a little bit. And that's when you'll see that students will be able to really cater the academic experience to what their career aspirations are. So with the exception of one of these what we call flex core courses, so business law, leadership communication, managerial accounting, students can select which ones they want to take. The rest of that second year is designed to really be customizable for the student. So just to go back to this previous slide, these are the concentrations in which students are able to take electives. Accounting, communications and media management, finance, information systems, management, marketing. We also have some more cross-functional concentrations in corporate compliance, electronic business, entrepreneurship and venture initiation, global sustainability, healthcare management, and international business. One thing I want to point out here is, and I think this is a common misconception that people make when they're looking at concentrations at business schools. They liken them to majors in undergrad, where you have to pick a concentration if you're enrolled in the program. That's not the case. I would say about half of our students end up taking all 5 courses that are required to have a designation in a certain concentration. In other words, the ability to say on your resume, I have an MBA with a concentration in finance. But you don't have to actually pursue all 5 courses in a certain concentration. In other words, you're able to pick and choose classes from these different areas based on what you want to take. So if you want to take a couple of classes from the finance concentration, a class from information systems, a class from management, you have the flexibility to do so. So think of these concentrations more as umbrella terms in which all of these elective courses are offered. So again, that all happens in your second year. This is when students can start to pick and choose their own courses. One more thing I want to point out on this slide, if you look there at the top left, the preterm Gabelli launch. This is one of our unique offerings that we have here at the Gabelli School. It's a relatively new program, and it's a preterm that happens the month before classes even start. So say classes start on September 1st. All full-time MBA students will come to New York City a month early and participate in this robust preterm that really is meant to ease the transition from the start of what is a totally new academic experience to ultimately landing a new job and pursuing a new career. So each week has its own theme to really help in doing that. The first week is all about leadership development. So you spend a week learning about yourself as a leader and learning about team dynamics. The second week is actually a global immersion trip. So students will hop on a plane and go into a foreign country and do a consulting project. This year our students went to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and did consulting projects with NGOs there, which was a really great experience. So really the reason for doing that is it's a great way for the cohort to get to know each other because you're in a foreign country and you're getting to meet your fellow students in that environment. But it's also good exposure to the consulting world, which is an area where a lot of our students will end up going. The third week is dedicated to career development. So as I've mentioned multiple times already, a big part of the MBA experience is career development, is finding the internship, is gaining the skill sets that will allow you to land a job. That third week is designed to kind of help expedite all of that. So students are doing resume workshops, are learning about industry, are doing mock interviews with our career development staff. So that third week is dedicated to everything related to career development. And then the fourth week is an analytics boot camp. So as many of you know, the MBA experience is is a quantitative heavy degree, so we want to make sure that you are up to speed with your Excel skills, etc. So that week is really dedicated to everything analytics. So that is a brief overview of what we have of what the curriculum looks like for the full-time program. I do want to back up a little bit and talk about some things that really differentiate us as a business school as a whole. And I've already alluded to this, but our location in New York City is really one of our biggest advantages as a business school. I always tell students, there really is people consider New York City the business capital of the world. So there really is no better place to study business than what people consider to be a business capital. And the advantages manifest themselves in different ways. I think one of the big advantages is that you have access to companies. I mentioned that we have over 300 company headquarters right here in Manhattan. To be able to have access to these companies, whether it's going and meeting their executives or having executives from these companies come to our campus to speak to our students, I can't stress enough how beneficial that is for our students. Not only because you get exposure to different industries, but because you can really network with people from these companies and land internships and ultimately job offers from these places. For people who aren't familiar with New York City, we are located, and Fordham actually has several campuses, so I do want to touch on this. Our business school is located right at Lincoln Center, next to Columbus Circle in Manhattan, so right around 60th Street. So we're 2 blocks away from Central Park, about 5 minutes away from all of the, a 5-minute walk from all of the big 4 management consulting companies, a 10-minute subway ride away from Wall Street in the financial district. So we are really in the middle of it all, and that really is a unique thing when you think about where you're going to study business. We are a destination city. So I mentioned the access to companies, and then another one of the big advantages is access to alumni. Alums are huge in the whole process of trying to find internships or learning about what career paths you want to pursue. And the fact is, a lot of our alumni are located right here in New York. They're working in New York. So students are able to go and have a cup of coffee with someone working on Wall Street simply because of the proximity of our campus to all of these major firms. So I think the access to companies, the fact that we even have some adjunct faculty that are teaching elective courses, their day job is actually working in the field, but then they're able to come to our campus and teach a night course because of their proximity to our campus. That really is a big advantage. So New York City, and then the other thing I do want to touch upon is what I like to call business with purpose, and it's a philosophy that's ingrained in our business school, not only our business school, but I would say Fordham University as an institution. Really what it means is, we are a Jesuit school, and if anyone is familiar with the pillars of Jesuit education, excellence, community, and ethics, we are actively looking for people who are looking to, yes, succeed in business and make a profit, but not at the expense of ethics, right? We're looking for people who want to get an MBA and want to get this management degree to go out and fix societal problems, right? This notion of business with purpose. We want to train agents of societal change who also want to be successful, and I think that's something you will see really trickles down from the president and the board of trustees down to the faculty, down to how we're going and selecting students. For example, we're one of the few business schools that has a mandatory business ethics requirement. So I think that's one other thing to point out is this philosophy in combination with our location in New York City, really does make us a unique place to pursue your MBA. Here's just a quick snapshot of some of the places where our students are landing: Microsoft, Deloitte, Morgan Stanley, KPMG. We have students at the Big Four, big bulk banks on Wall Street. Just to give you an overview of where people are landing, about a third are landing jobs in financial services sector, a third in consulting, and a third and really a combination of different things in industry. We actually have a fair amount of people going into the business of entertainment, perhaps because of our proximity to Broadway. We're about a 10-minute walk away from Times Square and all the big Broadway shows. So just a quick snapshot of our employers. Okay, the fun stuff, application requirements, and I've already seen that a couple of people have asked questions about application requirements. So I will just run through this list really quickly and give you an idea of why we require these things and what we're looking for. The GMAT or GRE. So GMAT or GRE score, this is obviously these exams are predictors of success in our program. We do not discriminate one way or the other in terms of what score you submit. GMAT, GRE, they're designed for different types of skill sets. That's on you to research which one is better suited for you. The one thing I will mention is that some of these industries are now, depending on what field you're looking to get into, it may make more sense for you to take the GMAT over the GRE. So, for example, if you're telling me you want to go and want to do a management consulting at a Big Four firm, I would recommend you take the GMAT because these firms are overwhelmed with the number of applications each year, and now, and this is a relatively recent development, they are requiring GMAT scores as part of the application process. So again, as an admissions office, we do not discriminate one way or the other. We will look at either score, but it is on you to do the research to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success for your career hunt post MBA. The resume is probably one of the most important documents for in the application for our MBA program. I see a question here: do you need any work experience? Absolutely, you need work experience. That is of the utmost importance. I mentioned it on an earlier slide. We're looking for that sweet spot between 4 to 6 years. Work experience is what differentiates an MBA program from a master's program. The ideal classroom for us is someone, is the investment banker sitting next to the consultant, sitting next to the person who worked in education, and all three of them offering their perspectives in the classroom environment. That's where the learning happens, and that's why it's really important for you to have that work experience and that background. When we train our readers to look at our resume, we always tell them, at the end of the day, this is a management program. So your resume should reflect some management experience, right? Have you managed money? Have you managed people? Have you managed projects? If you have, that needs to be front and center on your resume. And make sure that your resume is a business school resume. And I don't have the time to really talk about exactly what that looks like today, but a business school resume looks different than a resume that you will use to apply to a job. So if you just Google, how to write a business school resume, there are plenty of articles, but I definitely recommend you do that because the business school resume looks a little bit different. Transcripts, so we require transcripts for any undergrad or other graduate programs that you've pursued. We're looking for your grades, particularly in your quantitative courses. And again, we look at that as a potential predictor of success in our program. Personal statement or essay. Now, the essay is really the one part of your application where you have a voice other than the interview. So definitely take the time to explain to us, why you're looking to get an MBA, why specifically you think the Gabelli MBA will be the right fit for you. Those are two things that when we look at a personal statement, we're looking to extract. At the end of the day, there are a lot of people who are pursuing an MBA degree and treating it as a transactional degree, right? It's 11 years old, and they haven't really put much thought into why they're getting an MBA. We're trying to weed those people out, to be quite honest with you. And one way we do that is through the personal statement. Do you have compelling reasons for wanting to get this degree? And do we feel like you would be a good fit with us here at Gabelli? Letters of recommendation, we require 2. And these are professional letters of recommendation, so we want to hear from former employers or people who know you in a professional capacity. Everyone who is admitted into our program will have had an interview. So that does not mean that everyone is interviewed, but if you are admitted, you have gone through the interview process with us. We invite all contenders to interview. Many of you are located abroad, so we will conduct a lot of those interviews via Skype or Google Hangouts. But again, it's a question of learning about your motivations, trying to figure out if you're would be a good member of our community here at Gabelli. So that's just a quick overview of the application requirements. Quickly to touch upon rounds and deadlines, we have 5 deadlines for fall entry into our full-time program. The priority deadline just passed, but our next deadline will be November 1st with a decision date of January 15th. I'll leave you guys to read the rest of those, but there's a couple things I want to point out when it comes to scholarships, and I'll talk about scholarships in a second. We give priority consideration to people who apply in the priority deadline, round 1 and round 2. So something to keep in mind. And then for international applicants, which many of you are, we strongly encourage you to apply by round 3. And the reason for that is there's the process to go through visa paperwork and things like that can take a long time. So we ask that you apply by round 3. Okay, financing your degree. So obviously pursuing an MBA, and I would just say graduate business education in general, is certainly an investment of money. It's also an investment of time. And there are many ways in which our students are able to finance their degree. One of those is merit scholarships that I mentioned earlier. So we have a very robust merit scholarship program. We awarded over $1.4 million last year. And the scholarships range from as little as $10,000 for the program up to full tuition plus a housing grant, a $20,000 housing grant. That's called our Dean's Premier Scholarship. So essentially you don't pay a thing to come pursue your MBA, plus you're getting some of your housing subsidized. So a robust scholarship program. All students are considered, whether you're domestic or international. We really use a holistic process when looking at who receives these scholarships. So what that means is, there is no perfect equation for who receives a merit-based scholarship. Just because you have a 700 plus GMAT doesn't mean you're going to get one, and just because you have a sub 630 doesn't mean you're not going to get one, right? We're looking at a combination of sure your GMAT scores, but also your work experience, if you present well in your interview, things like that. It's really a combination of all of the different elements of your application. And just to note, there is no separate application for merit-based scholarships. We consider everyone who applies. Graduate assistantships is another popular way that students will subsidize the cost of tuition. These are essentially on-campus jobs that students will pursue that range from 10 hours to 20 hours a week. And the payment is in form of tuition remission. So, say for example, you work 20 hours a week in the admissions office, helping us with recruiting activities. That would come out to be around $7,000 off of your tuition check for each term. So GA positions are available in administrative offices like the admissions office, like the advising office. There are also opportunities to pursue GA positions with faculty, doing research with faculty. There are some continuing student scholarships. If you go online, you can see a list of those. Those are endowed scholarships that are based on specific criteria. And then if you are eligible for student loans, public or private, students will go that route as well. And I'm happy to put you in touch with our financial aid manager, Lois, who's in our office, if you have any specific questions about that. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, and I didn't have much time to give it to you all, but I do want to open the floor for questions. Before I do, just quickly to touch upon other ways in which you can engage with us. So obviously you're here participating in this webinar, which is great, but just so you know, we have other things going on. We have actually a webinar happening in a couple of weeks here on, let me give you the specific date. It's going to be next Thursday, November 9th. We'll be doing a webinar that's specific to the international student experience here. So we'll have 3 of our current international students answering questions about what it's like to transition to life in the States and life in New York City. So I would definitely recommend you take advantage of that. But then we'll also have other webinars throughout the year. If you're ever in the New York City area and you want to come visit our campus, you can do that as well. And we'll also be going to India multiple times in the next month as well as in the spring. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to see what dates will be in your area if you want to come meet with the admissions staff. So that is it for me. Shivani, if you want to open up the floor for questions, I'm all yours.
That was good information. So we'll now take questions. So please type in your questions, profile related, any questions that you want to ask Dylan. Meanwhile, for people who have joined late, this recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. So you can revisit it and probably watch any part of the webinar which you have missed. Just going by the questions which have been asked till now. So there are questions around work experience. I know you said 4 to 6 years is the sweet spot, but what would be the is there any minimum or maximum work experience? Because we have students right from 2 years to 10 years applying for MBA programs.
Sure, that's a good question, and I think that's a common question that we'll get. I would say the hard and fast cutoff minimum is 2 years. And in terms of a maximum, we don't really have a defined maximum, but I think once you start looking at 10 plus years or maybe 12 plus years, we start thinking of the executive MBA as being perhaps a better option. But a couple things I do want to mention. So first of all, more of a technical thing. When we calculate work experience, we are calculating work experience from the date in which you would start our program. So, for example, if if we're reading an application today, we would be calculating as if you would be working through the spring up until August. So always consider that when you're looking at work experience. We're looking for professional work experience up until the start date of the program. I think that's important to note. And then the other thing too is the value of the work experience matters as well. So someone could come in with 3 years of work experience and maybe they've been promoted multiple times and they have robust managerial experience already after 2.5, 3 years. Well, that person might actually have a stronger resume than someone who has 5.5 years of work experience but has been working in maybe more administrative positions, right? So really at the end of the day, if you feel like you're lower than that sweet spot, it's up to you to really articulate in your resume why the value of those 3 years or the value of those 2.5 years is such that you would be on par with someone who has 5 to 6 years of work experience.
Right. So Dylan, can you also share your experience with Indian students? Like how many students are typically there in the MBA batch and their backgrounds and they getting jobs? If yes, in which sector?
Sure. So we certainly get a decent number of Indian applications each year. This year we have, of our cohort of about 42 students, we have 2 students from India. One of the things we're really proud of with this cohort in particular is that there's a lot of diversity in terms of representation of different countries. So we have 13 different countries represented, and India is actually one of the best represented in having multiple people. So, in terms of, their success, I think in general, international students now face challenges in getting sponsorship in the States for business schools. That's not a Fordham specific issue. That's a nationwide issue. But generally speaking, I think because we are in New York City, the top tier of our international students are getting sponsored and are getting full-time offers. But even those that, maybe aren't getting that initial sponsorship from a company, because New York is home to so many headquarters of global companies, there have been so many different cases where students maybe don't get a full-time offer to work in New York, but they get a great offer from, Deutsche Bank to go work at their bank at their division in London or something like that. So I think being in New York City allows you to, kind of get your foot in the door with these major companies in your internship, and then though you might not get sponsorship to stay after your 2 years, you're able to land sometimes even more lucrative offers in other countries just because of the fact that these companies are global.
Right. So Rima has asked a question. Her score is GMAT score is 650 with 2 years experience. What are my chances, or should I apply for 2018 or 19?
So Rima, I would say that again, it would have to be that's very little information to go off of, so I don't want to give you anything specific. One thing I would point out is that 2 years today, or is that 2 years when you were to start, if you were to start in August? Again, that's the way we calculate this. It would also depend on the value of your work experience, right? So I think that if you have significant roles within your company in IT in this IT space, then maybe 2018 would make sense. Given just this information here, I think 2019 would make more sense. Simply because people who have 2.5 years generally have less of a chance of being admitted, because that work experience piece needs to be extremely significant in order for us to feel good taking you into a classroom with people who have 5, 6, 7 years of work experience.
Mansi has this question: what are the values apart from GMAT, GPA, work experience, which causes exceptions in admissions? I think she means what does Fordham look for in an MBA?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And it's what I was talking about earlier when I say, I think it's so easy to focus on kind of the data points as being the end all be all in the process, and they're really not. The essay, I'm going to give 2 examples. So I would say the essay and the interview are 2 areas where you can really control what happens, right? So when you talk about a GMAT or a GPA work experience, to a certain extent, those are already set in stone. But if you can present effectively in an interview and effectively articulate your motivations for wanting to come to Gabelli, and you can show kind of this genuine enthusiasm for the degree, and you speak eloquently, that will go a long way in the process, because at the end of the day, what we care about 2 things, right? We care about what you add to the community at Gabelli, but then also are you employable, right? Are you someone who's going to be able to land a job? And if you come and you sit in front of me and you're able to, in half an hour, really convince me that you're someone who would be a good addition to well, then for me, that means you could probably sing same thing. So the interview is really a place where you can shine as an applicant. And Mansi, to give you a specific example, and obviously I'm not going to name names, but there was a student last year who, based off of the numbers, and I could see them before I interviewed the student, was definitely on the outside looking in for admission. She was someone who was below our average with the GMAT, below average GPA, We ended up inviting her to interview because we thought her essay was compelling, and she did have some decent work experience. And within half an hour of speaking to her and conducting the interview, I thought the person could interview. And she's come here and she has lived up to those expectations. She's been an absolute rock star here. But that's a perfect example of why it's so important to make sure every part of your application is refined and perfect. I mean, yes, the GMAT takes the biggest amount of time to prep for and everything else, but there's all of these other elements of the application that are equally as important. And that's just a perfect example of someone who was kind of below average in those areas, getting to the strength of the other parts of the application.
Right. So, Dylan, considering many of our students are looking for a career shift after MBA, be it an industry switch or a function switch, so how does Fordham help people in switching industry by offering enough opportunities? If you could throw some light on the internships and how many internships are available in the program.
Yeah, and I said this at the very beginning, right? That the program is really designed for people who fall into that bucket, who are looking to make a pivot. So yeah, a couple of ways. I mean, career development. The Career Development Center is working with students months before they even come on campus. So once you're admitted into the program and you put down your deposit and you said you're coming, they will be emailing you incessantly to make sure you're working on your resume, to make sure you're participating in webinars. They'll have you participate in what's called Big Interview, which is essentially a mock interview online, which they will then critique so that you can start working on your interviewing skills. This happens before you even set foot in New York City, because the career development process is really ongoing throughout your entire MBA experience. I mentioned Gabelli Launch, which is that month-long preterm. There's a whole week dedicated to making sure you understand the timelines for landing internships, for making sure your resume and your elevator pitch are up to snuff and ready to go. I mean, some of you may already be aware, but if you're not, you need to be ready to interview. If say you're looking to do consulting, if you want to get a management consulting interview, they're going to be coming on campus in September, right, to start interviewing our students. So once you've started classes, if you're not ready to go with your resume and with your case interview skills, if those aren't up to snuff, you're going to get left behind. So it's important that you're on this, that you're ready to go with your resume and everything else well before these companies are ready to hire, and career development is really on top of our students from the beginning. And one more thing I want to point out with career development that I think is unique to Gabelli, all of our career development counselors are former practitioners in the field that they're assigned to. So for example, we have Ellen Herman. She's a former managing director at an investment bank. She's the one doing all of the counseling for people looking for roles in finance, right? So this is someone who has hired for investment banks before. She has the experience. She understands the timeline. She understands what these people are looking for. So you're getting kind of that direct access with someone who already has the experience, the knowledge, and the network in that field. Same with marketing with Kim. Same with Ken, who works in more of the tech space. So all of these counselors are hired from these industries already. And I think that's really important to note. You're really getting kind of that insider access. And you're getting a lot of personalized attention. That goes back to this sense of community that we have here at Gabelli. You're in a 42-person cohort. What does that mean? That means, yes, you have access to professors. That means you have access to advisors. But more importantly, you have access to your career development counselors. Right, you have access. You can walk into an office and have a 45-minute long meeting with your career development counselor because they don't have a 300, 400, 500 person caseload, which you'll see is the case at a lot of other business schools. So the fact that you can get a lot of personalized access from career development, I think, is extremely valuable. And then I know I've hammered this point home multiple times, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Access to companies in New York City. Right, part of the whole, the part of the process with applying to internships is applying to multiple places, going through multiple rounds of interviews. just the fact that you have these companies that are like 5 minutes away from campus means you can apply to more places, you can interview at more places, and you have access to more alums in these locations where you can go and network and meet these people who could end up being the person who put your resume at the top of the pile. So I would say the career development staff, this access to companies and alums in New York is really what allows our students to kind of gain the professional experience they need to be able to make a career change.
Right. So Dipanshu has this question around fees. I know you have covered tuition fees. So if you could also tell us about the average cost of living in New York, how much will it really cost to do a Fordham MBA, the 2-year course?
Sure. So yeah, so the 93,150 is the tuition cost. Like I mentioned, the fee. One fee I do want to point out is the $5,000 program fee, which it really covers a lot of the global immersion trips that you will do. So for example, in that second week of Gabelli Talk, you go abroad. This year it was Argentina. That covers hotels and flights for that portion of the Gabelli Launch program. So it ends up being, with fees around, I would say close to $99,000 for cost of attendance. Living in New York, that's a great question, and I think that's one of the a big daunting thing for a lot of people looking to pursue a degree here is, oh my gosh, it's so expensive in New York City. As someone who lives in New York City, I'd be the first person to tell you, oh, did I just lose my screen sharing? Shivani, is my screen still there? Can you guys still hear me? Okay, sorry. Sorry, my computer went to sleep there for a second. But going back to cost of attendance in New York, if you want to live in Manhattan, right? And I think a lot of people, when you think of New York City, you think of Manhattan, you think of the island where the Empire State Building and Wall Street is located. Cost of attendance will be higher than a lot of other places. So for example, I think the average cost in Manhattan for a 2-bedroom is probably around 3,600 US dollars. But I think one thing that goes often unnoticed when you're thinking about living in New York is that this is one of the most accessible cities in the world by public transportation. And though it's common to think of living as only in Manhattan, there are very reasonable places to live in Queens, in Brooklyn, in Harlem, in the Bronx, where you're paying significantly less, and it's taking you just around the same amount of time to get to campus to go to class. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I actually live in Manhattan. I live on the Lower East Side. So I'm on the east side of Manhattan. The campus is on the west side. I have a colleague who lives in New Jersey, across the river, who is paying significantly less for his or her apartment, and she gets to work probably 50 minutes before I do because the commute is so much. It does not take as long. So there are trains going to all boroughs, and I think that it's important to really cast a wide net when you're thinking about where you're going to live. A lot of our MBA students are living outside of the island and taking the train in because New York City is really so expansive, but also so accessible. And then the other thing too is I do want to mention there are some opportunities to live on campus. We do offer some graduate housing. So right behind our campus, there's a big building where students can, they're essentially apartments. We also own an apartment building a couple of blocks away. Prices are going to be less than what you will find with apartments that are in kind of the Columbus Circle area. But still within kind of the price range that you'll see in Manhattan. But like I said, there are really a lot of places where you can find reasonable living. They're just not always right on the island of Manhattan, which is I think the place where a lot of people will tend to focus at the beginning.
Right. So I'll ask one final question from Ajay. Is there any difference between MS Finance and MBA Finance? And are any of these two courses STEM affiliated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, when it comes to the programs, the big difference is kind of the makeup of the the classes, right? You're looking, a lot of the finance courses that you take as an MBA are going to be reliant on you having work experience and being able to share your work experience in the classroom. That being said, there will be some classes that are cross-listed between the MS in finance and people pursuing a concentration in finance within the MBA program. Those, again, I don't have that list off the top of my head, but I would say in general with a lot of these electives, because there are so many course offerings, some of them will be classes where you will be taking courses with other MS students. But certainly not all of them, and I would say that the main differentiation in general between these two programs is that you're looking at people who tend to have more work experience, and the learning is a little bit more experiential in an MBA classroom over a master's program.
So Rima has this last question on average salary package which a student can expect after doing an MBA.
Sure. So with bonus, it was for last year's class right around 105,000 for the MBA.
Right. So I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Dylan, for conducting this webinar on a Saturday. It was really an informative session. And thank you all for making this an interactive session.